talking about how sad they are and angry that they don't get to murder their unborn child in 10 states. There's 10 states, 10 whole entire states where you don't get to kill your baby in the womb. You know, everyone's all mad at Clarence Thomas and the Supreme Court for striking down Roe v. Wade, but you should have and could have seen this coming for a long time. Like, I'm trying to keep this reaction like emotional and visceral and not as much legal as and political as the last, reactions I typically have to stuff. But like, you can get an abortion, weed's illegal. Weed was illegal for a while. Could you still get it? Yeah. Heroin is currently illegal. Can you still find it? Yeah. It's just really dangerous. Same thing is going to happen with abortion. And by the way, it's still going to be legal in 40 states. Okay? It's not like heroin is legal in 40 states. You can go to the next state and get an abortion. And by the way, I know I said I'm not going to get political, but like if you use like free interstate commerce grounds idea or Ninth Amendment grounds ideas, like, oh, our freedom and our right pre-existed this law. Our freedoms and our rights pre-existed the modern medical practice of abortion. Our rights pre-existed the existence of the modern gun and the invention of the machine gun. I mean, the machine gun was like basically invented in 1715, but whatever. The law shouldn't and doesn't change your freedoms. Whether a corrupt government lets you have something doesn't and shouldn't affect the fact that you have the right to defend yourself based on the fact that you have a finger capable of pulling a trigger. Okay? Socialists and gays and communists and Jewish people, disabled people, all have the exact same rights as white Christian bigoted men to defend themselves against muggers and tyrants. And when it comes to abortion, I mean, I don't fucking know. Maybe this will cause women to reflect on how much danger they put themselves in getting drunk and going out, frolicking around with men who, there's a lot of women who are turned on by danger. And I know this is not something a lot of people want to talk about, but for some women, they can't get off unless they feel like they're in danger. And yet they want men to pay for their abortions? Like, why? I didn't fuck you. I don't have to pay for anything that has to do with your vagina. And by the way, if you want more men to talk about how they support abortion, then don't spend the next few years telling them that they're a man and they don't have a right to talk about it at all. So I have to comment on Clarence Thomas's opinion in the dismantling of Roe v. Wade. So in his opinion, he stated that in the future, the court should consider reversing, or should consider it its duty to right the wrongs caused by courts allowing cases to pass like Obergefell versus Hodges, the case that legalized gay marriage in all 50 states, and Griswold v. Connecticut, the one that legalized contraception. Now I say legalized because it's a difficult thing here. Thomas is expressing his opposition to not exactly the outcome of these cases, although he may disagree with the outcome. What he's criticizing, at least directly, is substantive due process. And I admit I had to look this up. He's talking about the idea that government can take an unenumerated right and then use force to enforce that right. So if you've heard me talk about the Ninth Amendment before, you'll know that we have unenumerated rights. We have a certain set of rights. We don't know how many there are. Ninth Amendment is kind of like a blank check amendment, because you're born with the right to walk and travel and move around. I mean, you acquire that right after a year or two. At least you have the ability, potentially, when you're born. And you have the right to work. You have the right to quit. You have the right to marry who you please. Now, that's kind of a sticky thing, because if you have a right, do you protect that right, or does the government protect it? Or is it both? Like, if I have the right to marry a guy, do I have the right to turn to some armed people, some armed bureaucrats in the government to help me marry a guy? No, I can just fuck a guy and write it down somewhere that I've married him, and then tell all our friends and family that we've married, and everyone will agree. You don't need the government to enforce what is already widely agreed upon and is what is obviously a freedom and a right that you've already attained.
So Thomas is arguing essentially against the idea that you even need the government to uphold your right to obtain contraception or same-sex marriage. You see, if you need to defend yourself against a mugger and you know the cops aren't going to be there for 15 minutes after you call them, it doesn't really matter if you theoretically have the right to be defended by government. They're not going to show up. You have to do something by yourself to get that right or that freedom you want. So look up substantive due process. I don't know if Thomas is actually against gay marriage and contraception. I don't think he is. And I think hopefully he understands what people have been pointing out in memes, that if this goes far enough, it'll invalidate interracial marriage. But really, it won't invalidate it. It'll just make it so that the government doesn't have to use force to make that still exist. It's different. Another comment about abortion. There was a post from Andrew Yang saying it's hard to deny that the Supreme Court has become political. And then someone posted in response, well, looks like the guy who just started paying attention finally showed up, or something like that. So, yeah, you could say the Supreme Court has been political, but if you study the Constitution and jurisprudence, you'll understand that if you see it as political, you're just really projecting your political views onto their interpretations of the law. They're interpreting the law not from the position of their own opinions, at least ideally, or their own morals. They're interpreting it from the opinion of what the fuck is in the Constitution and what it says in Article 1, Section 3, Clauses 1 through 18, about what level of government different topics of the law are supposed to be on. You know why Roe v. Wade got struck down? Because abortion and healthcare and contraception and reproduction are not mentioned in the Constitution even once, anywhere, which means it's not a federal responsibility unless and until there's a constitutional amendment saying so that gets ratified and passed and signed into law. Now, is murder illegal at the federal level? I mean, only if you're a terrorist and you commit murder on federal jurisdiction. But by and large, murder is supposed to be prosecuted by the states. All murders which don't take place on federal jurisdiction is to be prosecuted by the states, unless and until there's an amendment saying so. That's how it works. You disagreeing or you having a problem with how it works, that doesn't make it not how it works. That's just you complaining. Now, I saw a post saying, let's propose a bill in Congress saying that rape should be punishable with death. Let's see how the Supreme Court would react to that. Well, thanks for showing your stupidity. The Supreme Court wouldn't have a chance to vet that until the very last moment, first of all. Second of all, you can't prosecute rape with the death penalty at the federal level because murder, like I just said, is prosecuted by the states, unless it happens on federal jurisdiction. So you need to understand what level of government these laws and these topics of law are supposed to be legislated on. You could just, this is why I had a problem with Roe v. Wade, not because I have a problem with abortion. I'm completely pro-choice. But Roe v. Wade is a totally unconstitutional arrangement set up between the federal government and the state, and there's no precedent for that. There's no guidance for that in the Constitution that says that would make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's a state's issue. So, in summary, rape and murder are not national issues. They're not national issues yet. Now, does that mean they can't ever be national issues? No, they can be. You just have to use the amendment process. You see, not every supporter of the Constitution is a Constitution worshiper. Not every supporter of the Constitution thinks the Constitution is perfect. I support constitutional processes, and that means the amendment process. If you want something to be exclusively national jurisdiction, you have an amendment passed that makes it national jurisdiction, and then you can have acts of Congress that regulate that topic. So in summary, there's 3 levels of government: national, or sometimes called federal, and then state, and then local, and the people. Now, the people are not at the bottom because they're on the bottom power-wise. It's the people and their property and their rights that give rise to the creation of local governments that protect those property rights and local governments are within a state government, and then the state governments got together and made the Constitution, which is a national government. There's a national seat in the District of Columbia, but it's called the federal government because the powers are split between the federal government and the state governments. And originally, if you read Article 1, Section 8, clauses 1 through 18, those are the enumerated powers of Congress. It's not the same thing as a list of your rights. It's a different idea. The main three national responsibilities, the responsibilities of Congress, are supposed to be money, mail, and military, like the post office, the armed forces, and the Federal Reserve. That's obviously a private independent bank, and Congress is supposed to be running that instead of a Federal Reserve. But, they kind of delegated their rights aside, and that happens. It's not okay. It's not supposed to be like that. But the federal government's supposed to run money, mail, and military. And that means anything like health, education, social security and retirement, child support, the environment, things not listed in Article 1, Section 8, clauses 1 through 18. Those are left up to the states or the people. It doesn't say the states. The 10th Amendment doesn't say leave it up to the states. It says it's to be left up to the states or the people. You see, jurisdiction is split up by topic matter. Not a lot of people believe that. Only the people who read the Constitution believe that. National government does money, mail, and military. And then in each of the 50 states, it's up to the people and their state governments to negotiate with each other how much they're going to regulate certain topics of law, and certain professions, and certain sectors of the economy. Now, ideally, in a free market economy, they wouldn't regulate the economy at all. But whatever. The point is that the people are sovereign, and the people give the power to the state governments. The state governments give a little of their power and the people's power to the national government. And abortion is not mentioned in Article 1, Section 8, clauses 1 through 18. Like I said before, neither is health nor reproduction. So why do we have a Health and Human Services Department? Well, because someone decided that we have to have education, so that means we have to have a Health, Education, and Welfare Department. And then they split that up into 3 different agencies, and it's very debatable how much of this is constitutional. Like, this is all predicated on the necessary and proper clause. The reason the government is like twice as big or more, way bigger than that, than it's supposed to be, is because there's this necessary and proper clause. And all things necessary and proper for putting into motion and putting into power the foregoing powers, which are the ones that are named. Government doesn't get to just do whatever it wants in order to implement laws that regard policy topics that aren't even mentioned in the enumerated powers of Congress. They can't do that. So why was the federal government regulating abortion? Why was there this agreement between the national government and the state governments about what happens in what trimester, and you can do this then? What does that have to do with a woman and her husband? What does that have to do with a woman's relationship with her doctor? What does that have to do with the mother to child relationship? Nothing. There's no constitutional precedent for Roe v. Wade. Therefore, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, if you read the Constitution correctly, it should logically be struck down. And that's why it's struck down. Now you may say, well, Obama failed us. They said they were going to write to abortion into the law. They were going to codify it into the law. And they didn't do that. Okay, you can try to do that, but I'm pretty sure you're going to need a constitutional amendment or it's just going to get struck down. It's like, let's have an act of Congress to take everyone's guns away. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's just going to get struck down when the Supreme Court finds that it runs contrary to the Second Amendment. Like they just did find out that New York law runs contrary to the Second Amendment. You can't disarm the people because the states accepted the Bill of Rights, which include the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. So abortion is not supposed to be a national issue, and it never was. And if you want it to be one, then you have to have a constitutional amendment saying that it's exclusively national jurisdiction, abortion, as a topic. And then you get an act of Congress regulating abortion as the majority of the people wants.
That's how you would regulate abortion on a national level if you followed constitutional processes. I'm trying to help pro choice people. They're wasting all this time, all this money, all these years, just like, let's have an act of Congress doing something that's totally unconstitutional. Let's waste our time with something that's going to get struck down eventually. It's like, just do the process, just follow the process that the Constitution tells you to. It's right there. Just get 38 states' support and pass the thing. Then you can regulate it. Don't try to regulate it before you get an amendment. That will be struck down. I've warned people like dozens of times about this. Minimum wage, abortion, um, labor rights. They're trying to find reasons to deny you rights and privileges and freedoms all the time. They're sneaky. You have to understand how the system works. Even if it doesn't work, you have to understand how it's supposed to work and either play that game or figure out a way to change the system with a constitutional amendment, or just state that you're going to disregard the Constitution and have a revolution. If you're going to do that, that's fine. Hopefully it's peaceful, but if you're going to do that, say that you're going to do that. If you're going to ignore the Constitution and the need for constitutional processes, and you're just like, let's make abortion a national issue and take everyone's guns away, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So either read the Constitution, read Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1 through 18, to know what the enumerated powers of Congress are. And note that the right to regulate abortion and the right to take everyone's guns away, they're not specifically enumerated in those 18 clauses. They're not. I'm sorry. All of this has been swept into the executive department and swept into the national jurisdiction falsely and unconstitutionally because people think it's necessary and proper for the government to be way bigger than it needs to be in order to exercise and execute the money and mail and military responsibilities. You have to study the Constitution, even if you don't like it. If you want the law to change, or maybe you like it the way it is and want it to stay the same, you have to study. It's like an operating system manual of how your government works. It's a document in which the policy topic jurisdictions are negotiated between the national government and the state governments and the people. That's what the Constitution is. It's not a list of laws that some old white man believed was written by God. It's the operating manual for the United States national government in its relationship to the states and the people. You don't have to pretend it's the fucking satanic Bible. Just learn how to use it.